Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salatu wassalam ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I was reading this piece that they used to tell Dutch school children about the medieval times where there was this ship and there was some mercenaries on the ship and got picked up. The captain on the boat it came to his attention that some of the people on that boat might be spies, that meant them no good. And so when they were getting ready to pull into port, he had this idea that says, okay, look, there's this particular name of a town, Scheveningen, something to that effect. And the only way you would be able to pronounce it is if you were from there, right? And that would kind of let the captain know who was really among his people and who were outsiders, right? So when they gathered them all together and they made them pronounce this town. And if you could, then you're good, right? But if you couldn't, then they made you walk the plank and then you died. You drowned, right? And I started thinking about that in relation to the Islamic paradigm, right? Like, in Risalatul Jamia, for example, it mentions that, which is a book of, Shafi fiqh, it mentions that you have 14 places of tashdidat, right? Of tashdid, right? And because when you recite the Fatiha, you have to have precision, right? Like, for example, in other books, it might say you have to rectify your Fatiha. But in this particular book, it gave an example of like how to do that, right? That you have to be precise and you have to know how to recite and to say the Fatiha, right? And it brought me back to that story about knowing, how you will be known, right? And even like with regard to, like, we just had the Maulid today, where we celebrate the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the same thing, right? You start to think about it like, when you're in the grave and you're asked, who is this man? There's a hadith that says, reportedly, when asked about that, about, who is this man? Ana la adri, they say. Right? سمعت الناس يقولون شيئا. Like, we heard the people saying things, and that's it. Like they don't, like, there's no precision, there's no knowing, right? You gotta get to a point that if you're gonna be a part of something, that you should do and say what they do and say, right? like reciting the Quran. It's very to recite the Quran in Arabic according to the rules of recitation, you have to learn that. Right? Like the rules of tajweed, you have to learn how to breathe. I remember the first time I tried to like recite the Quran how it's supposed to be recited, you know, just the breathing itself. You get to one of those long ayats and you follow the rules, especially if your Arabic is like and you don't know how to read like really, really fast, and so you're kind of stuck in this, you're going to drown. You're going to get stuck in the middle of the ayat before you make it to the next pause or stop to take a breath. Let alone like the rules of it, right? But even in the hadith of the man who killed 99 people, or well, 100, and he says, is there hope for me? And when he was told, yeah, go to this town and do what they do, right? Meaning, live how they live, worship how they worship, say what they say, do what they do, right? Because how else are you going to be known? Right? Jadidu imanakum aktharu min qawli la ilaha illallah. Right? Constantly renew your faith by saying la ilaha illallah. Because when you know what to say and you say it correctly, it becomes a rehearsal and a practice, and it will hardwire you into you. For example, if you die and you don't know what to say, you're going to resort back to what you know. And so how many people, when if death presents themselves to them by like falling all of a sudden, they might say, oh shit, right? Like that's what's going to come to their mind. So for people, for example, who have bad language, you may be prevented from saying that because you haven't habituated yourself to saying what's correct, right? To being able to pronounce what's true. You know, and this is a precise endeavor, right? So those are just some of my thoughts on that. That story made my mind drift back into, you know, understanding that through an Islamic lens on how important it is to being able to recite or to say things precisely and correctly, and what that ultimately means, you know, in this life and in the in the akhirah, right, in the hereafter. So, you know, may Allah give us to that. May Allah give us over to knowing how to recite what we should be reciting. Our awrad, our adhkar, Quran, hadith, dhikr, right? Everything, right? Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.